Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Toffees. My name is Toffees, as always, bringing you the Dota 2 fill-in, I guess, the news roundup, as we love to do. If you don't know, you can follow me at Twitter, at Toffees_Dota2. If you want to keep the show running, which we love to do because we want to keep this thing grassroots. We've been approached by sponsors, trying to chase them out. You can support us over at patreon.com/Toffees. And of course, if you want to stay in contact with me, we have a new chat channel in-game. It's Coffee with Toffees with the W/, and you can get on there, chat with me anytime you want, give me news ideas or just guest ideas for the show. Like we said, we're recording a little bit early because Cap lives in Germany, and it is the middle of, it's not even the middle of the night, it's first thing in the morning over there, and he's been gracious enough to stay up late to chat with us. So that introduces our guest, Austin, the Capitalist Walsh, joining us, staffcaster for Join Dota. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing pretty good. I just wrapped up a series between Alliance and Team Empire. It was a really good best of three. Was very, very close. It was a lot of fun to cast, and well, the funny thing about being a caster is that in Europe at least is that this is generally about the time, like, I will probably be up for at least another, 2 hours at least. Both Toby and I have really screwed up sleep schedules where we're usually going to bed about the time the sun is rising, so.
Lucky you guys. Sounds like when I was a bartender once upon a time, so I understand. Well, let's go straight to the Dota news. We'll work our way through that because there's a fair amount of it, and then we'll get into a nice sit down, talk back with the Cap to hopefully give you guys a look at some things maybe you haven't heard from him before. So the first piece of news, we're not going to get into depth with it, is 6.82C came out since last we talked. The big news, I think you need to understand that there's a little bit of a longer time before you can buy back, but other than that, it's nerfs that we knew were coming, and this is not a patch assessment show. If you want that, go somewhere else. We just talk about the news, man. But if you want to hear about interesting things or dynamics or statistics, go check out anything written by Got Cow over on Join Dota because he loves numbers, as does Nahaz. The two of them should start some sort of we love numbers show over on JD. But I think that they'll have something good up about 6.82C. News that is relevant to what I talk about. CDEC has left LGD Gaming. They are literally picked up, I think it was an hour later, by Douyu, D-O-U-Y-U TV, which is basically the Chinese version of Twitch, from what I understand. I'm not surprised, Cap. I think LGD CDEC was sort of getting this vibe of the second team, and them going off on their own just makes sense to me.
Yeah, and honestly, they've shown performances that say that they aren't a B tier team. They're still below LGD for sure, but they when they were first created, it was oh, it's the junior team, it's the B team, it's the JV squad. So I think that their recent performances, I've seen some really good games out of them where they've topped out some teams that have been unexpected. In fact, I believe they're one of my teams for I believe they're my team for MSI.
Oh, yeah?
MSI beat it. I should probably know which teams are going, but I'm pretty sure they're my Chinese team. Hold on, I have to actually look it up. Beat it 2014 global. Yeah, they beat VG Gaming.
Yeah, they did
3-1 in order to make it into. So yeah, they've definitely they're no longer a B team. They're sure as hell not the best Chinese team.
Right,
but they're not a B team, so I like the fact that they're going off on their own.
Yeah, definitely deserve to kind of have their own name. So I'm down with that. I think it was a great choice by them. I think it was interesting that a stream site has picked them up. So I can guarantee you that if any of them weren't streaming before this, you can go to Duyo and catch them streaming all the time, since I guarantee that's probably part of the contract. Heard a joke, I don't know if it was Nahaz that posted it yesterday, that said, you know when a team picks up a sponsor because the players start streaming out of nowhere. So I imagine Duyo will be doing the same thing. Next one, and this is a big one because everybody's been talking about it, and Mineski MSI Evo GT. What you need to know about this is Mineski's had a bunch of investigations that they've done in their own players because of their desire to seek out honesty and kind of fair play. And what happened at the end of the day is 8 players have resigned from those 2 teams. All 5 members of MSI, from what I understand, and 3 of the members from Mineski have backed out, admitting that they fixed matches, if I remember correctly, in Star Ladder. Games that didn't matter in the overall scheme of advancing to the finals, but did matter in terms of gambling. And from what I understand, they made about $900 US off of this whole thing. So kind of a sad... I mean, I guess here's the thing, Cap. To me, I don't know if you've been following the SEA scene, but there's been 3 major tournaments announced in the SEA over the last week that total almost $100,000 in prize pools. And these 2 teams are essentially out of the running for those things for $900 cash. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to part of the problems of being a professional player is that you kind of need that steady income, and many players don't get that. There's the chance to go big and, be set for the rest of your life, and then there's also the chance to be, the 16th place at TI where you don't get anything. So, I don't know. This could have been just them being greedy, but, maybe it doesn't matter about the money. Maybe it's just like more is more no matter what. Right. But at a certain point, this really screws the scene because the Southeast Asian scene is one of those scenes that is very, very fragile. We've seen how they went from Dota 1 to being like, oh God, it's the Southeast Asian teams. It's like, oh Jesus Christ, the West is gonna fall to China and Southeast Asia. And now they're a footnote. I mean, they really are. They are not the same force that they used to be, and a lot of it comes down to like stuff like the military. A lot of it comes down to like the culture in general is just different, more pressure on like those sort of things. But so little thing like this, like your scene is so fragile already. 8 of your players are kicked out of their teams. I mean, this screws the Southeast Asian scene really hard.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly tough for them. And on top of that, when we roll over into tournament news, our next feature section, guys, both teams were removed from the Summit. So Summit, the famous for its casual style of tournament format, has kicked both out of the running. So they leave. FD and Rave are going to step in to fill those spots. But once again, a giant blow to the SEA scene. And definitely worth mentioning because of what has been going on over there. But moving on, let's talk about the D2CL. C9 has dropped out of it due to scheduling conflicts. Fnatic steps in. Interesting thing about this is an example of the value of belonging to a massive organization, right? Because Fnatic's roster is still sort of in flux, crazy. I guess they haven't really proven themselves to me, but they're getting a chance to step into one of the biggest tournaments going on right now. So that's, I guess, one benefit and a great chance for those players who are standing in to show their abilities. But the question is, are there teams, that deserved a better shot at taking that spot? You don't have to answer that if you don't want to, but here's your comment on that. By the way, guys, we obviously, Cap works for Join Dota, so if there's anything that comes up that you can't talk about or don't want to comment on, just say no comment and flip me off or something like that.
Well, I may flip you off anyway, but
I like it.
Honestly, there's nothing that are really holding back on. Like, Fnatic, yeah, I mean, they're a newer team. I think the biggest thing is just like Cloud9 just dropping D2CL playoffs like that is pretty crazy. Yeah. I was just like, when I heard the news at the Skype conference, I was just like, what?
Yeah.
Like, excuse me? And apparently they, like, before this happened, but they were already kind of, like, talking to the admins about the next season. So I guess they still want to be a part of D2CL.
Wow.
I don't know. It's really weird. But it goes to show, like, there are so many tournaments going on.
Yeah.
Like, we were talking about this before TI4. Like, tournaments. Players, teams are going to start prioritizing. We're seeing that happen now.
You absolutely, and it's one of those things where you have to wonder. So we know that they're prioritizing tournaments based on things like prize pool and competition level. Now the question starts to come: how do we figure out which tournaments Valve themselves are taking the most stock in? Those are the tournaments the teams are going to play in. So maybe we see some oversaturation, but I think that's something that will come up in the next few months. Not today. Next news: Newbie drops out of the D2L. Team DK happily steps into the spot and will take over for them. So they get the chance to go to Vegas, which is always sort of nice if they move to the advance. A shame to see Newbie drop out. I've been considering actually going to that land since it's free and there's gambling. Would love to have seen Newbie play, but that's a shame. And the second thing that goes along with that is VG and Newbie both pulled out of the StarLadder LAN. Now that's not the StarLadder tournament or the league, that's the LAN final, so that's a really big dropout. C9 and Virtus Pro happily step in, probably ecstatic to get those spots. Both of the teams who dropped out claimed visa and passport issues as the reason for their dropout. Though, I gotta be honest, in light of Newbie's drop from the D2L at the same time, it seems like there's a lot more going on than just visa issues.
Yeah, when they're like, oh, Ukraine seems a little, it seems a little dangerous to be going over there right now. I'm just thinking, yeah, that's a total bullshit excuse.
Yeah.
You just don't want to go.
Right.
You just don't want to go. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. It seems like the Chinese scene is just like, okay, we're taking too much on our plate.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that's one thing. Like, if we're going to see it in the West, we're definitely going to be seeing it in the East, because it seems like the East really prioritize like having like team houses and like practice scheduling and all these sort of things. They seem to really focus on the welfare of their players and making sure that they're basically, at the end of the day, everything's about TI. So, pushing yourself to the limit like that may not be worth it when there's a much bigger payoff 9 months from now.
Absolutely. And, we talked with Brax last week about his time training in China and the differences sort of in the process there. And he put a lot of stress on the fact that the Chinese teams have incredibly regimented training schedules. They take everything very, very seriously, but training and practice is a huge part of what they do. I feel like in the Western scene, a lot more of our prep comes from playing games and getting out there and, say, scrimming. It seems like the Chinese teams like to just sort of keep trying things on their own. So you got to wonder if all these tournaments have infringed upon their ability to use that system and might have motivated the pullout. So a little bit of insight from Brax that maybe will help us understand the newbie situation. So the final piece of news that we have to talk about, because everybody's talking about it, is Dream League, right? Literally, my notes say Dream League, what the fuck? So what I did is I put a summary together for you guys. Now, this show is designed for casual consumption. This is made for you to drive to work, to play at the gym, to just relax. And you don't want to read all the Reddit posts, so I did it for you. And here's what I came up with. Long story short, Team Tinker wants to go to bed. The admin says, sure, why not? We'll play tomorrow, no more games tonight. Team Tinker says, wait a minute, when they wake up the next day, because they've been marked as a loss. They complain. The admins come back and say, all right, well, we don't really know what happened, but we'll make it up to you, but we need you to use one stand-in out of fairness to your opponents. Team Tinker talks to the team, and they agree. They say, you know what, that's fine, let's just do this thing. They log on to play their game I think it was about 45 minutes to an hour before it started, and are told, hey, by the way, you have to have 2 stand-ins instead of 1. Team Tinker says, not going to happen. Admin says, well, then you're going to the lower bracket now. Team Tinker posted on Twitter. The Reddit army raises their torches, and all hell breaks loose. So I think that pretty much sums up what we know so far, but I will say this. We are still awaiting official responses from DreamHack, from Nukes, from Hellspawn, from the admins of the tournament. And remember, guys, there's 2 sides to every story, so make sure that you're hearing both sides before we get all fired up about this one. But so far, not looking good for the administration side of this tournament, is it?
No, definitely not. This is something that it's important having good admins, and I'm not saying that Nukes is a bad admin. I think he does adminning for MSI Beat It as well. I know I've seen him around, so like in the games, I've never had any issues with him whatsoever. So, and part of this was like also the idea of like Hellspawn basically said that out of fairness, like the idea is okay, right? Like there's a thought process going on there, and I like the fact that like a lot of the Reddit, the instant Reddit is like, people are just posting like, oh, if a team has a stand-ins, we have to have stand-ins, and then everybody's like, what kind of rule is that? Like, it's actually specifically because they don't want to. They don't want to, like, this wasn't A-Shock's fault. So they're trying to make it fair, even if it's the wrong way to make it fair. Personally, I think you just have to eat the gun and be like, well, sorry, A-Shock, you have to play with a stand-in. Team Tinker gets to play with their 5. You get to hate us forever now because we screwed you. Like, I think that's what you have to do. But either way, they tried to make it fair, right? And then the thing was, Hellspawn said 1 for 1. Turns out there was a second player traveling 2 for 2. Team Tinker were like, no, we agreed to 1. Chappie was like, Chappie's a great manager. Chappie makes sure that his players are good to go for going into a game. And so he fought that decision. I mean, it's any good manager would. And now, I mean, they did play the game, right? They played the game. It was full 5. I don't know actually who won. I watched like the first part, but then I had to cast. So
hopefully somebody in Twitch chat can tell us, because I did the write-ups before the game was played today. But that said, you're right. It was a sort of make it fair. We sort of dropped the ball. In a small way, I get where they're coming from, because an admin is sort of like a manager in real life, right? The organization hires the admin. They've got to back what the admin says. So if the admin says that wasn't our communication the night before, they don't have any other option for where to go with this thing. And that's sort of where it went down. Unfortunately, Team Tinker, for them, is a monster among the Dota scene. So that would sort of being like saying Brad Pitt walking to the restaurant being like, no, he definitely spit in my food. Like, you're going to get canned. Unfortunate for you. And that's sort of, I'm curious to see where that breaks down. But we wanted to give you guys the basics of the story. We're not going to go too much deeper into that, but I will follow it over the next couple of weeks. And on top of that, I like that you brought up Chappie because he is a strong manager. I've heard a lot about him. And I think a lot of folks don't know what managers do. So I've actually invited next week, Charlie Monolith is going to be coming onto the show to talk about what managers do. Charlie's always on streams. He's always on shows, but it's always just sort of like yelling about things and arguing with Gerg for the most part. He's going to come here and actually talk about what a manager is, how you get to that point, and a kind of a new side of Dota we don't often talk about. But enough of that. Let's talk about why we're all actually here. The guy sitting across from me, the webcam in the naked room, it is Dota Capitalist. Thank you for joining me, of course. And I think it'll be a good time. Let's start out with this. Now, everyone wants me to ask you the same questions that we always ask, which is like, how did you become a caster? Tell me the story of your casting career. Or the typical questions I got on Reddit all the time, which is like, Cap, how do I get discovered? How do I get hired? Hire me, Captain! So what I want to say is if you want answers to that, go watch the Hotbit interview. It's actually pretty funny. He has a very phallic microphone, which makes it even more entertaining. So check that one out. But I will ask a couple of follow-ups there. So in the interview, Hotbit asked you about your transition to Germany and becoming a caster. The answers are great. But here's what I want to know. At what moment did you look at your casting career? Did you look at what you were doing and say, I could do this. I can get off the forklift. For those of you who don't know, he was driving a forklift at the time. And become a caster for real.
Well, let's see. That moment was when I was sitting in my forklift, working very, very late. So I would work these like really, really long, like 16-hour days. Sometimes where we had the ship, and basically you had to load the ship as fast as possible. And I remember because we were having this small little break. It was like 1:30 in the morning. And we were having a break between trucks, and I was just holed up, on my phone, whatever, anything to distract me from the mind-numbing boringness of my job. And and I got a message on Skype from Toby, and he was like, "Hey, so would you like ever consider moving to Germany for a job?"
Jeez,
that was the moment. Like, it really caught me by surprise. I was like, "Wait, are you fucking serious?" Like,
wow.
Because at that point, like, I mean, look where I was at that point.
Right.
I was more known for being a co-caster than a caster, right? I was co-casting with Toby, and let's face it, like, co-casting and not being a professional player
right.
doesn't really, like, you can't really do that. Toby and I talked about this in one of our Talk Dota episodes, and we talked about how, like, professional player first. Like, you right. want to be able to have a professional player. You look at how many co-casters out there that are full-time co-casters that aren't professional players.
Right.
It's Lumi and it's Draskell. Like, those are the only two out there, and that's because they've been here since the beginning.
Right.
I'm not sure if you can actually make it as a full-time professional co-caster without having that professional background.
Right.
And coming into it now. Like, if you start in the beginning, sure, you build up that respect, you build up a fan base, and you move on from there, and that's fine. But
right.
so from there, I was known as being a co-caster. I didn't really think I could, like, it's always a better option to have a professional player at that point. You would much rather hire Synderen full-time. You would much rather hire, a lot of the players that you have on regularly.
Right.
I'd love to be able to have, like, Boba in the studio with me all the time. But so I didn't think I was ever going to make it anywhere with that. I just used my co-casting to try and bump my profile as a caster in general. But I couldn't really make enough time and effort to really put in a full amount of time for regular casting. So
makes sense.
That was the moment.
So that's the moment on the forklift. Forklift equals inspiration, Hefla says in the Twitch chat. And for those of you who are watching, aspiring casters, I'm sure are tuning into this. I think the moral of the story is practice your camera work, boys. You need to be good at it, especially with all the changes they're making. If you can't use the zoom and some other things, you're going to be screwed. Moving on to the rest of the Hotbit interview. In the interview, you said, and this was probably one of my most entertaining parts, that Toby is the worst player in the studio. It took a while to get it out of you, but you admitted to it. And it was because he casts too much to focus on actually playing. Now, you've been there for a year now. It's been over a year since you made that transition off the forklift to casting a copious amount of hours. Do you feel like your game has slipped since you moved to the studio?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was a better player when, like, because I used to actually, for people who don't know, I used to actually play competitively. I never made it anywhere, but I played competitively in Dota 1. I played competitively in Han. I did so in Dota 2. I was obviously much better when I was scrimming consistently, but knowledge-wise, I feel like I just slip on mechanics and stuff because I'm not playing constantly. Knowledge-wise, I feel like I'm still in good shape because I'm watching games constantly. I keep up with the scene even when I'm not casting. I make sure I watch games in order to keep up with the latest of what's happening and just general break down games as much as possible. But from a mechanics perspective and just like having like there's a difference between like mechanics. There's mechanics and then there's like knowing the game, and then somewhere in between is just having the feel for the game, you know? And when, you go a week without playing any Dota, you go back to playing some pubs, your feel of the game is kind of off. But I still try and play, like, I don't do anything else. Like, Toby plays Assassin's Creed, Toby plays Counter-Strike, he enjoys those games. I don't really enjoy anything else but Dota 2. I play a couple of indie games here and there, but mainly it's Dota 2. So I still play a lot of Dota because I just don't enjoy anything else. That's really just the truth. So, and that and the other thing is, I want to have a large E-penis. That's what it comes down to. And I've got a decent rating in matchmaking, and let's be honest, like, I'm never going to make it as a professional player because I'm now fully committed to being a caster. So, like, I will never have a background to go back on. Like some people. Like, I won't be able to, like, point to one team and be like, I was a part of this team. Like, I was a part of XTV and Han, and we made $500 from a tournament. Like, nobody gives a shit about that. But at least I could be like, well, I've got 5,300 matchmaking rating. Like, rating doesn't mean really jack shit. Like, it's a number and that's it. But it's something. It's something. It means I'm not total dog shit.
No,
I know the game. I can play at a decent level.
It means you can play at any elite league in the country, in the world. So that is something. That's nice. I'd love that. But I think the head doesn't translate to the hands when you don't play enough, and I totally understand where you're coming from. So that's interesting. So game slips. Good to know. Now let's move to a couple Reddit questions. Ocean Dota from Reddit wants to know, and I really thought this was a good question, what's with the name? Is there a backstory to the capitalist?
See, if I gave enough of a shit and I was smart about it, I would have changed my name before I tried to become a personality.
Right.
Because I get plenty of hate messages that are like, "You stupid capitalist pig, capitalism sucks, blah blah blah." So here's what it comes down to. When I was, I used to be known. My old alias was actually the Cow King, based off of the Diablo 2
Nice.
level. So I used to go by the Cow King. I created my new alias when I was playing some game with a group of friends, and one of my friends was from Canada, and he was like a hardcore liberal. And I tend towards conservative side. I'm more libertarian. Economically, I'm very conservative. But talking about it, we were having some conversation or whatever, and as a joke, he changed his name to the Communist, trying to like taunt me or something like that. So I changed my name to the Capitalist, and I was like, it's got a kind of nice ring to it. I kind of like it. So I just kept it from there. But I still like constantly just like, now that I'm personality, I don't get it as much. But it was funny when I'm just like a random player. Like, somebody would message me after a game and be like, "Capitalism sucks" or some shit like that. It's just like, whatever. People also want to know my like political leanings. I am a libertarian, but there are plenty of social programs that I think are well worth it. I'm more than open to a dialogue about certain more liberal programs. I think that a lot of social liberal things are very, very smart. Legalize weed, gay marriage 100%, all that sort of thing. But when it comes to economically, I do tend towards the conservative side, and that's where kind of the capitalist name comes from.
Fair enough. So a social liberal, but a fiscal conservative. I appreciate that. Do you still mail-in vote? There's a good question for you.
I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this next election, because I am also of the complete persuasion that like, my voting doesn't do anything. And I know people argue like, what if everybody thought that way? Well, not everybody thinks that way. And like, honestly, when it comes down to it, if I don't vote, I'm making other people's votes count more valuable, right? Like, less people vote, the more valuable the votes are. So I honestly don't think that like, not vote or die, like, retarded. All right, don't, like, not voting, really not that big of a deal. Like when it comes to your local stuff,
Right.
yeah, like sure, it makes a lot more sense
I'm
on
a-
a national scale. So I probably won't make the effort.
Fair enough. Well, I'm on your side. When I taught history at high school, I was the only teacher who told kids not to vote when they turned 18 and got in a lot of trouble for that. I said, "Listen, if you're uninformed, just stay the fuck home."
Yes, please, please.
And then the principal got mad at me. So there's always that. But I did put in my notes: could capitalist have taken a more stereotypically American name to go to Germany with? Come on, man. But I love it. It works well as cap, and I do think it rolls off the tongue well. So good choice in the long run.
I didn't realize this, but like all my German coworkers, like they didn't know me. Like they
Right.
a lot of them aren't Dota 2 players or anything like that, so they didn't
Right.
know me. They knew me as Austin. But like now my nickname is Cap. You know how
Right.
awesome that is?
Cap's
It's like
awesome.
Captain America.
Right?
I'm Cap.
Right. I mean, a Marine who moves to Germany and becomes the captain. It's a comic book waiting to happen. You're going to get it inside. If Loda can have a CD, you can have a comic book, as far as I'm concerned.
like it.
So, all right, next question is from Skeletron over on Reddit. He wants to know if you have, and this is a really good one too, if you have a training regimen that you employ to hone your casting skills, or is this organic, or do you work on it?
Most of it is organic. I am the biggest thing that I do for training wise is I have this black book that I have put together. I originally put it together for TI4, trying to prepare as much as possible for Frankfurt and TI4. I write about like the teams. I write about specific players, strategies that I found interesting that I can make callbacks to.
Right.
But this book is also turned into like a casting book. I remember a really long time ago there was a guide by Red Eye. And it was talking about casting. And I remember one of the things that he put in there was that it's important as a caster to keep your language fresh.
Yeah.
Right? And that's something that you don't want to have too much repetition. You don't want to be saying the same phrase or the same word over and over again. So when you're trying to describe a team fight or something, you need to be able to focus on your vocabulary and change it up as much as possible while still fitting the situation. So I actually have a list of like synonyms for a cast that I feel like would really fit a certain situation. And I don't know, it's just something small that I do, but no, I don't. Like the most that I do is like a black book like this, which I put some minor notes in. I don't really do anything too major, and then go back and listen to casts. But I don't do just because we cast so much.
Right.
So I feel like just casting so much actually gives me like there's practically no need to practice because I'm always casting.
Because you're always doing it. It's not like you're just playing a game on Sunday. It's kind of like being in the Major League Baseball. They don't practice as much during the year because they're playing 7 games a week. So totally understandable. Here's the question that I have, though. Do you ever watch sports? So first off, do you ever get do you get American sports over there, or are you pretty much like starved for what you came up with?
So I don't give a shit about sports.
Nice. All right. That's good.
I don't watch any sports at all. I never did.
Nice.
My dad would try and convince me to watch sports. In fact, this will lead into a little bit of a side tangent. A little bit of a story. It actually plays into why I'm a commentator now. My dad used to take me to like Mariners games back in the day, and there was this really good commentator. His name was Dave Niehaus. If you ever get a chance, you should look up some highlights of Dave Niehaus. He was a great commentator, and he was one of those guys who was really, really alive. Like, you could feel the energy. And despite the fact that I did not give a single shit about sports as a kid, my dad would drag me into these games anyway. It was a father-son time, and I didn't enjoy it at all. But as I've grown older, obviously, you look back on those things, and you have a certain nostalgia for those memories. But Dave Niehaus, and like listening to Dave Niehaus on the radio with my dad when we were driving and like talking about like a baseball game, and he had these lines, like I still remember them. Like for example, when they hit a grand slam, he would call it it's grand salami time, baby. Like I still remember that, and that has stuck with me. And while the lingo, like that sort of lingo, it's like radio lingo, right? It's something that makes your brand stand out. It's not necessarily, I think, something you want to do with commentating for esports, but it is something that the energy that it brought to a cast stuck with me, and I think
Right.
that's actually played into the commentating I do now, and it's the way I explain to my dad what I do.
That's cool.
Even though he was like, "You're moving to Germany for what the fuck now?" He's really supportive, but
Right.
I think he's always looked at what I'm doing here in Germany in kind of a light of like, yeah, you're doing like your Europe thing, you know?
Right.
After you finish up college, you go backpacking in Europe, sort of thing. I think he looks at it like this, where I'm like, no, it's a real career. I'm going to try and make this work for the next 30 years. But
So it's interesting that you bring that up because that was somewhere I wanted to go with this one, and it is. Halbo brought it up on Reddit too, so it was a great question. How do you feel about making a living out of casting? Like, love it, worried about it, think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread?
I love it. I mean, I love my time. I get to fly around the world, see different places. I get to meet people. I have fans. Like that, I remember like explaining to my mom at one point in time when I was like co-casting with Toby, and I was trying to explain to her like she knew what I did, but I remember she asked me if I really thought I could make a work of this, and I was like, well, I'd like to, and like I was telling her, I was like, I have fans. You know how weird that is? Like, I'm just a normal person, but I have fans. That's like mind blowing. It's just like so weird to think about, but it's something that's really awesome.
Right.
And so I get to travel around the world. I get to meet new people, and I get to do something I love. Like, if I could do this for the rest of my life, well, I don't know if I'll enjoy doing casting for the rest of my life. The way I went into this is I was looking at it going, I'm going to do everything I can in my power to make this work as a commentator. And if I don't make it, whatever. If I don't end up enjoying it, whatever, I'll move on. You know, it could be 2 years from now I don't like it anymore.
Fair enough. So let me ask you this. And this is something I've been curious about. How much do you think casting, or the casting, or who's brought in to do the casting, plays into the overall draw for a pro game?
I would say very little, honestly.
Okay.
I really think, like, everybody has their own preference of caster and all these sort of things. Like, but when you look at, like, just the numbers for like, a Twitch stream, like, for example, just something that really makes a big difference is that you look like a year, even just like 6, maybe 9 months ago.
Okay.
You would notice a big discrepancy between Beyond the Summit and Join Dota when we would cast something. And it was just like, okay, maybe BTS is just much more popular than us. You know, maybe they got their stream up sooner, and we're just like, what exactly is that?
Right.
It turns out none of that shit matters. Like, it doesn't matter who's casting on their channel. It doesn't matter who's casting on our channel. It doesn't matter who gets their stream. Like, all those things are so small in comparison to one thing.
Right.
Which was, at the time, Dota 2 Lounge. It was funny. Like, everybody would go there. Everybody was betting items, right? Everybody would go to Dota 2 Lounge. And if the stream was always BTS, then everybody would be watching BTS.
Fair.
And then it would snowball, right? It would be like, oh, this stream is like the top on Dota 2, which means more people would go to. It would be a snowball effect.
Right.
It was funny. It was like, it doesn't actually matter. It's like, people will still be drawn, like, sure, if it's LD and Merlini, it's Toby and Cinderin, like, it'll be camps back and forth, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
But, I think it actually, you know, I don't think it really matters that much. People will watch the stream on mute if they don't like it. You know, it is what it is.
So, do you think that just casting in general, having a voice there, like when we watch football or soccer, makes people comfortable and draws them in? Or do you think it is really just like a 10% increase to viewership? I mean, I guess the reason I ask is, so today Secret replayed the game that they were doing the makeup on, and it wasn't aired because obviously there were no casters available. It wasn't pre-planned, and I forgot the name. I should know it off the top of my head. A player decided to go ahead and cast it to help out for people who wanted to watch it. And I think they pulled in about 1,000, maybe 1,500 views, something in that ballpark. But you would argue that if Team Secret was playing that game on the JD channel with JD casters, that probably would have been a 10 to 20,000 view game. Is that because of the channel's visibility? Is it because of the casters? Or just because no one knew about that channel because it was just too small?
I think a lot of it is, like, nobody knew about that channel. It was just so small. I honestly think, like, honestly, when I like, for example, a long time ago, I was casting for Absolute Legends, and Absolute Legends, when I joined them, they promised me they were going to be running these tournaments, and it was this King of the Hill thing.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, we did some really big game, and we got a shit ton of viewers, and nobody knew who the fuck I was. Like, people thought I was like, people thought I was Triumph. People thought I was Purge. Like, it went on and on and on. Like, nobody knew who the fuck I was. Yet we still had tons of viewers. And like, a lot of it is just like proper advertising of the game, right? So putting out on social media, having the game up on a channel that is popular. I mean, part of the reason that guy probably didn't get many viewers is because it wasn't on a channel that a lot of people are following. So people had to go out of their way to look for it. They found a link on Reddit, or they scrolled through like the list of Twitch streams or something like that. They actually had to go out of their way. People are lazy, man. If you got a channel that has a lot of follows, people will go to their follow thing and be like, oh, look, this person's streaming. And then they get locked into it. You know, even if they may want to watch a different game that's happening, but they'll forget about it because they're watching this game because they clicked on it, because they're following the channel, and then next thing you know, 3 hours have gone by. They missed that other series, but they watched the series that they had followed. So.
Speaking of laziness, by the way, guys, for those of you who are used to the show, my webcam's broken, but I'm not complaining because it means I can actually chew my fingernails during the broadcast, which has been wonderful so far. But here's the next follow-up. And it's interesting that you say that maybe casters, it's not that they don't matter, but they're not the big draw. Do you think that casters are earning enough? And to put this into context, over the last year and a half, I think we can all agree, player salaries, both in prize pool winning and salaries, and by the way, a lot of the teams don't discuss what their contracts are. They're restricted about talking about it. But I know for a fact a lot of them ask for large base salaries with less actual winnings from the overall tournaments, but those salaries have skyrocketed. Some players in the upper echelon are making upwards of $1 million, if not more than that, a year. By that same context, are you still living in an apartment with a sofa bed, a washing machine, and a desk, as it were said?
Yes, I am.
Nice.
Yes, I am. I have made no upgrades to my apartment. So Toby and I have said this before on stream. Like, both of us made much more money at our previous jobs. Like, I used to work at an industrial paper factory. I made $22 an hour. I worked a lot. I had many opportunities for overtime, which jumps up to $33 an hour. The amount of hours I put in working for Join Dota and the pay I get, Toby definitely makes less than minimum wage. I would hazard if you looked at, because Toby just doesn't shut off. Like Toby. He's got so much responsibilities because he's so tied into Join Dota and blah 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 that he just really just doesn't shut off. He's actually taking a vacation next week, I think. If it actually works out, he'll take a vacation, which is good for him. But he's just like, he kind of just doesn't shut off. He's always working. So like we make very little if you look at the amount of hours we put in compared to the salary we make. But it's an amazing job nonetheless. Neither one of us would go back to where we were. Are we making enough? For me, it's not necessarily. It's not about the money. I don't think it's about the money for either Toby or I. Toby, I'm sure, is plenty. I'm pretty damn sure that he's probably had at least 10 different offers in the last 2 or 3 years that would have made him a lot more money. But the thing is that it's not necessarily about the money, but there is a lot more money flowing into esports, and I think you do have to fight for me, it's about value. Right. And you don't necessarily, like, sometimes money is value, sometimes value is different than what money is, but when it comes down to it, when it comes down to a job, money is primarily value. So for me, I want to be valued. So for me, I don't really need extra money. I get by. Like, I went without a washing machine for 3 months. I was able to live. Like, I just scraped up enough until I was finally able to buy a washing machine. Then I got it. I would love to have blinds on my windows. I could use some artwork. I could use a real mattress.
How about a poster? Just a poster.
Bed. Oh, I do have posters.
Okay.
I do have posters from TI. But, like, I don't, like, honestly, like, the life I'm living, it's fine for now. Like I'm 24 and that sort of thing. But there is a lot more money flowing into esports, so you do have to fight for value.
Absolutely.
In general, like jobs are very adversarial. Like between you as the employee and them as the employer, you do have to fight for what is yours. So I do what I can to fight for more.
Right.
And I think players need to do that, especially players. Like salaries, salaries may have gone up. I've talked to several players, though, and salaries haven't gone up as much. Like there's so much more money. There's 10 times more money in esports, but salaries haven't gone up 10 times. You know, there's still players, you know, struggling especially in the tier 2 and tier 3 teams. So prize pools have definitely gone up drastically, but salaries, especially in the tier 2 and tier 3 teams, don't reflect the amount of money in esports. And so I think players especially need to fight for, just fight for their value. It's basically what it comes down to.
Absolutely. I 100% makes sense. I've been in business all my life, and I've always wondered about that, in the idea that there's a ton of money, like you said, increasing exponentially, coming from sponsors. I mean, we've got lifestyle sponsors. The Air Force Reserve, for crying out loud. T-Mobile is showing up and throwing money at esports. What? A year and a half ago, I was like, that's not going to happen. Come on. Get me some SteelSeries keyboards, and I'm happy. And now we've got T-Mobile throwing things at people. And it's one of those things where I see contracts signed by players that I know, and I think to myself, man, I saw some of the offers that came out, and I won't talk about which team it was, to a team that recently signed with a sponsor. And the offers that came onto the table, 3/4 of them were literally predatory offers. And I was like, that's just mind-blowing to me. So that's something that maybe, you know, I think, I actually know Nahaz is hanging out in Twitch chat. And last time we had him on the show, I know he works with Join Dota a lot. And he's a big advocate of tournament oversight. So my question is, and I'll ask this question right now, the idea of these increased spending in tournaments, the need for talent, on top of that, the flurry of craziness that's been going on in tournaments with the cheating, the match fixing, the dropouts, the overscheduling, the admin issues. Is it time, do you think, for more oversight, maybe in the form of a governing body for esports or Dota specifically?
Well, that's tough to say. I think there is something that is going to need to change as time goes on. Maybe it is going to be some sort of a governing body. Maybe it's just some sort of voluntary grouping of community members and organizations. I think something definitely needs to change. It doesn't, like, the problems happening right now aren't as bad, but as time goes on and esports becomes bigger, those problems are going to start being exacerbated quite heavily. So I think there is going to need to be some sort of organization that comes forward. I'm not sure how heavy-handed I want that organization to be. But again, it's my libertarian roots coming into play that I'm just like, no, I don't want any of that. No,
keep out the structure.
What to do, right? But at the same time, I try and stay open to those ideas, and I do think that we are going to need some sort of governing body of some sort. And I don't think it'll ever come from Valve, so I think it's going to be something that the community puts together. We'll see whether or not the community is ever successful in doing something like that, but we'll see.
It is tough to rise up, but so that's something to consider. I'm sure it'll keep getting talked about until esports are so big that it has to happen organically. But interesting. So let me ask you this. We'll get to some things that are a little lighter. What is your most embarrassing moment casting?
So the immediate one that jumps to mind would be that fairly early on to me joining Dota, we had a very big game, very exciting series, and I ended up asking about. So it was the interaction with Chronosphere and Evasion, right? Chronosphere disables Evasion,
right?
Evasion doesn't anymore. I got the mechanic wrong,
and that was it.
Shit happens, right?
Yeah, well.
That's what happened. I got flamed a bunch, but you know, it's like when you're solo casting and you're talking about 20 million different things.
Right.
And Dota's a very complex game, man. And like, you don't think like people are like, oh, I remember like people were like, oh, idiot, like fuck, such a fucking noob, all these sort of things, and we really weren't seeing Void that much. In that, like the game that I had, it was a long time ago, right? It was like a long time ago. It was like 8 or 9 months ago when Void really wasn't being picked up at all, and so like you have to brush up on those mechanics things and I just like forgotten about it. And of course, as soon as like I saw like chat or something like reminding me, I was like, oh, of course,
right.
like, I knew that. I knew
right.
that. It's not like I didn't know that. I've been playing Dota since its inception, but you forget a lot of things. It's just there's a lot of information in Dota and a lot of mechanics, a lot of strategies, a lot of blah 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 to keep up on. And so sometimes you screw the pooch. I wasn't too upset about it, but it wasn't like I was like, oh god, how am I ever going to show my face in public? But
right.
It was just like, oh, that was a stupid mistake. Oh well.
There could be more embarrassing things that could happen to you. So I think
we all know at least one caster who would have. I think he has trumps everyone when it comes to embarrassing stories. So
and trumps everyone in ability to triumph over embarrassing situations that I don't know that I could ever have come back from. So
no, seriously, everyone knows. Like obviously, I'm talking about Ziori. Like
right.
I remember like when Ziori was first coming on the scene. Like, I didn't actually know about that because it was something that happened on after I left Han. So, like, when he started coming onto the scene, I was checking out his Dota radio stuff. I sent him a message. I was like, hey, man, I actually think your casting is pretty legit. I think you're going to be one of those up-and-coming casters. You know, I'd love to be able to cast with you sometime, blah, blah, blah. And that was just, like, kind of the introduction sort of thing.
Right.
And really what did I get into was, like, it led me into... I know this is really, like, I know, I think I just said, like, I'm really impressed by the way you were able to move past such a really embarrassing event like that and move on. Like, that's really impressive. Like, you know how many people would be like, fucking kill me now? Like, they would change they would change their whole entire persona, they would change their name, they would, like, completely distance themselves from, you know, the Ziori, but he kept on. And, like, and honestly, like, love him or hate him, like, that is something that you should probably be impressed with. Like,
absolutely.
Not many people could pull that up. So.
You got to give mad props, and I think the thing that I respected the most was he came out with a video. I think it was less than a week later that addressed what was happening. And I was like, wow, super props. So it could be worse. A bad call is tough, but for those of you who don't know, who are listening and watch cast and say, how could they not know that? Solo casting is probably the most mind-fucking experience of the world as you're watching everything, controlling a camera, double-checking Twitch chat to make sure your stream's not down, and calling out 6 billion mechanics at once, so totally understand that issue. Let's see. What else have we got here? Here's a fun one, and we started this with a sit-down that we did with some other casters in the past. I like to ask it, if your casting voice were a pair of underpants, would they be boxers or would they be a briefs man? Right? Where do you go with that?
My casting was a voice.
If your casting voice were underpants.
So how would I describe my voice? So my voice, like, I'm a pretty deep caster. My voice is, I've been told my voice is nice, but it's not amazing. Like, it's not AC levels of Golden. I think if I were to describe ACs, I think it's like comfortable holding, which would be what briefs are, right? Like, like snug, like it feels good, it's comfortable. So I guess ACs would be briefs. I'm not sure if I'm like, Toby's definitely like, if I were to go to the opposite end of the spectrum,
right?
Somebody like Toby's definitely boxers, right? He's a loose cannon. He's like all over the place. He's like free form, like so like you got room to move around with the Toby cast, right? Like anything could happen. I think I am very solidly in the middle. I am not as good as Toby as doing like entertaining bullshit that he does, and I'm saying that with love, cause
right? Absolutely.
What he does, like I can't do that nearly as well. I'm better at, like, I know more about the game, so I stick to my strengths. So I feel like my casts are a little bit more structured. My voice, I think I'd be like a nice little boxer briefs, honestly.
Okay.
But probably leaning towards more briefs.
So maybe some boxer briefs that are a bit too tight, but I get where you're going with that. I don't think I've ever.
You like my analysis?
Dude, I loved it. I was like, yeah. Toby's like waving all over the place. That was about as much as I need for a quality soundbite for promotion as I can get. So Reddit post, Cap talks about Toby flapping around in boxers. Clicks.
Oh God, that's an image I don't want.
Clicks coming. Clicks coming. So that is pretty much what I prepped for you today. I really appreciate you being here. To the guys who are viewing, everybody who stopped by live, thank you so much for being here, guys. If you want to support the show, if you're listening on the podcast, if you're listening in the SoundCloud, we release the show in like 4 different mediums. You listening helps us keep doing what we're doing. I say we because I just brought a producer on. Snuggies, who's over in chat, actually helps put this thing together every day. So a big props and a shout out to him who's working for free because, as Cap so graciously brought up, we don't really make much doing this at all. But if you want to help keep the show on the air and pay my fees, which is hosting and things like that, patreon.com/Toffees. We love you for your support. It means the world. And obviously, we do viewer games and all kinds of fun rewards. For that, we're, I think, $20 away from releasing a t-shirt, which would be pretty cool. So check that out in the new chat room over on Dota 2. You can join it. It's Coffee with Toffees, the W/ instead of the word with. Cap, I really appreciate you being here. Do you have any last thoughts before we sign out for the night?
No, man. I promised you that I would come on before ESL. I didn't end up doing that. I was like, oh shit, I feel so bad. I was like, fuck, I need to be on that show. And I listened to your show with Sheever, and I enjoy your show quite a bit.
Thank you.
I will try and promote as much as possible because I feel like that you really should get more exposure for this show than what you get, because you do a really good job. Honestly, I was very impressed with your hosting abilities.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's nice. That's nice. That said, guys, Cap said it. It's got to be true. Come back and watch the show. We got big guests coming up for you. Monday, we're releasing an interview with Sna, Narock, and the brand new Infinity team that Sna just, SNA, I should say, not Sna. I don't know why I call him that. SNA just put together, so they're going to be some forces to reckon with. If you don't know SNA, he's one of the guys who originally founded the Sneaky Nicks Assassins that is all over the place right now. So I look forward to the things that are coming out of his team. We're going to have Charlie Monolith on to talk about management later this week, and we are currently talking to a couple of Tier 1 team management groups on getting a couple of big names, and we're not going to tell you who they are yet because I want it to be a surprise, but we're going to have some big bad voodoo daddies, basically. Some of the guys who really represented ESL 1 showing up on the show in the next couple of weeks. So stick around, follow. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks again to the fans. Thanks again to Cap. And as always, guys, Toffees out.